Hello, everybody. Thanks. I think we're going to get started now. I just want to welcome you all to the Village Learning Place for our third Baltimore History Evening of 2025. I'm Deb Weiner, and I'm on the board of the BCHS. And I'm just going to give a few announcements before we get going. For anyone who might be joining us for the first time, the Baltimore City Historical Society is an all-volunteer organization that promotes research into Baltimore history and brings that research to the public with free programs like this one, which is part of our Baltimore History Evening series. And if you didn't get a flyer with the whole series for 2025, please grab one on your way out. We have 3 left to go. This is our halfway point. And in April, our next one is going to be a talk on the Black Panther Party of the 1960s by 2 undergraduates from Morgan and Hopkins, who've been doing some amazing research. So that should be a really interesting evening. And you can learn more about the Society and our programs on our website. And if you feel so inclined, you can also donate from our website. I'd like to thank the Village Learning Place for hosting the series, as they've done for many years. And if you're not familiar with this amazing institution, there are flyers from some of their programs over there on the ledge. And you can check out their website as well. They do a lot of great things here in Charles Village and have a ton of programs. And we're going to do, Mike is going to give a brief announcement about History Day.
The first, I think it's Saturday in May, is Maryland History Day. You've heard perhaps about science fairs. This is a history fair, and we're looking for judges. And if, this is all ages, I think from middle school up, various media. If you're interested in that, talk to me afterwards, and I can help orient you to a place where you can find out. While being a judge, you don't have to be a professional historian.
These are projects put together by kids, and it's like a competition that have every year.
Yeah.
It's really a great event.
And it's amazing to see what, because of internet, the resources that even middle school students have available to them. Archives from the 1860s that you normally have to travel to, at least to Washington to see. They can access from their bedroom and do really professional readings.
So we wanted to just make sure everybody knew about that.
Is that microphone on?
Yeah, can everybody hear me? No, please just raise your hand if you can't hear me. And the speakers, you're going to have to talk. The system is not, we have the speakers on, but they don't,
Well, it's a library, so we want to be quiet.
As long as it works,
Okay.
it's Zoom.
So I'm going to introduce our speakers now. They're architects, Jillian Storms and Jerome Gray. They both served as co-chairs of the Baltimore Architecture Foundation's research committee known as the Dead Architect Society. And Jerome also founded Jerome C. Gray Architect in 2013, and he is co-founder of Baltimore Sketchworks, which is an architectural research and field sketch firm that does history and art projects. He currently serves on the board of the BCHS, that's us, so he's one of our board members, and is a commissioner of the Maryland State Arts Council. And Jillian is on the board of the Baltimore Architecture Foundation, as well as Friends of Olmsted Parks and Landscapes. And she has received awards from the Baltimore Architecture Foundation and Preservation Maryland for her architectural research and public programming. And she currently directs the Maryland Department of Education's Office of School Facilities. And their talk today, as you can see, is the Wilkens Curled Hair Factory, the rise and fall of a major Baltimore industry. And after they speak, we're going to have some time for question and answers with the live audience. We are on Zoom, but the Zoom people will not have a chance to be participating in that. And we're going to wrap up around 8:40 so that we can be out of here by 9 p.m. And just one other thing I'd like to add is for everybody to please silence their cell phones, and we'll get started with Jillian and Jerome. Thank you.
I'm not gonna bow down for this. I'm just gonna talk loudly, if that's okay with you all. I just wanna set my clock so that I am timing, sorry. Just, we have two nerd out people here, and I originally, I could have done this on my own, but the trouble was, the last time I tried, this was a couple years ago, my mom got sick, and so I had to cancel, and I didn't want that to happen again, so, and he really wanted to see it happen, so I said, okay, let's do it together, and then we know we'll get it together. The trouble is now we have way too much. 45 minutes that you're going to be sitting here. So either we have to talk really fast, you're going to have to hear us like that, or you're just going to be willing to miss your whatever intermediate break or something, because we have a lot. And part of it is I got into this because I can thank my sister in Chicago. She has an online business where she sells antique images and stuff like that, and she has a friend who's a Wilkens, and they had a whole album of stuff, and they were like, we can't get rid of this, you know, we can't. Well, I think they came to Baltimore, they thought they could donate it to a museum, nobody was taking, and so she was helping to, you can find this stuff on the internet, but anyway, the thing is, she gave me all the images and said, hey, can you figure out what these are about? And I, who love exploring things and figuring out things, started looking into it. And it just became this fascinating history, because you don't usually have a collection of historic photos all together. And so Jerome and I, you know, we just started going, where would this be? And so you'll get to see some of that little bit of history. The other thing is she knows the Wilkens. So I've been in touch with the great-great-grandson of William Wilkens, Bruce Wilkens, who now lives in Australia. And he was going to be on the call tonight, but he had to be in the hospital. He's a doctor. But he said his kids are listening. So we do have people from all over listening to this thing. So we're going to try to be on our best behavior.
So I got roped into this whole business by Jillian. I don't know how or why, but no. It turns out there were two huge nerds, and we're happy to be amongst other huge nerds, and I wear that as a badge of honor, right? No, I go around town and I investigate buildings and sketch buildings on a daily basis, actually, and I post them on Instagram, and I'll give you the information of where they are later. As a result, I started finding a lot of histories of that part of town. And just so happens, Jillian and I have known each other forever, just so happens that she knew about this whole Wilkens business. She's the only other person I've ever known who's known about this thing. It's such an oddball topic. But I was really happy to be brought in to help out on it. And I think our resources complement each other. Somebody's got to watch the clock for us, though, because we will keep you here all night.
So
I'm not joking.
I'm going to take the first half, he takes the second half, and we're going to interspace a little between. So hopefully we can keep on track. And how do I advance?
Oh, that's right. I'll get next to you here.
I want to go on this side. You advance, I'm going to sit on this side.
There you go.
Okay.
I got your clock.
So first, we want to just set the scene, because some of you may not know where the Wilkens factory was. Do you want to bring up the first slide? So here is southeast Baltimore. So to orient you, this is the B&O Railroad Museum there, and this is the B&O Railroad tracks. This is the Carroll Mansion down here, their estate. You have probably Pratt Street coming across Lombard. This is Frederick coming down. This is where the factory was, and it's now the West Side
Shopping Center.
Yeah, and so this is the part of town we're going to be looking at, but we first have to go to where he first had his first factory. So I do want to show one more slide that should set the tone. This is a 1869 sachet bird's eye view of Baltimore. So here's the factory, and if you were to, have a micro, you'd say Wilkens Hair Factory. This is Frederick Road. Wilkens has not been developed yet, okay? But you have little clusters of the community starting, a little church here, but there are whole blocks that haven't been done yet. And you do have one of the last, over here is Union Square. So how that used to work is they used to, build up the square, and then the town would come to it. The real estate agent was able to get more money with the taller buildings around the square. So,
and remember, this was Baltimore County at that time. This was before the 1918 annexation, so
Yeah.
this is suburbs.
Yeah. So, next. So to just have a sense of who this man was, William Wilkens was actually born in Germany and in 1817. And this is his little farmhouse, this is Dad's farmhouse that he was born in, and his mom lived till he was 5 and passed away. And I think she had had a daughter, then him, and then a son. And then his father remarries a year later and has 7 more kids. So like now there's a family of 12. So I think as a second-born son, he's like, I think it's time to leave. So at 18, he's working a dry goods business, and he says, okay, that's it. He walks 100 miles to Bremen, where they have a steamship going to New York, and he had only 18 cents in his pocket, but he goes. And he decides that New York is not the place to settle because he just thought it would be too crowded, so he ended up going to Philadelphia and making a start there, and worked in a silk factory, and it actually helped him a little. There was connections there. I think there was also a hair factory.
There was, yeah.
And so he got to learn a little bit of trade. Then he tried his hand at, salesman. He kind of went down to New Orleans and stuff, and I think he didn't end up liking that business. He had to get a big shotgun to keep him protected, stuff like that. So I think he ended up going to see his dad. Oh, no, well, it says here that he petitioned to become a U.S. citizen in 1942. So he's 25 at this point. He marries his first wife, and he goes to see his father, and his father's alien, and I don't know if his father gave him money or gave him encouragement or what happened, but he came back and he said, that's it. I am going to open a curled hair factory in Baltimore. They don't have one. They need one. I see a business opportunity. So off he goes, and this is his request to be naturalized. And that's a later photo. I don't have any early young photos of him. Maybe the family could send that to me at some point, but that's one of his more lovely photos that they have. And next.
The great thing about it is if you start combing through all the newspapers from that time and you start reading about him, every single one, without fail, mentions that he only had 18 cents when he arrived. Right. I don't know why every single one mentions that.
And the thing is, he never forgot his roots. He was always helpful. He always helped immigrants get their start. And he loved to travel. His business did take off. They even had their own script so that people who worked at the factory could actually get things.
And good outside of the factory town as well. He would compensate you for anything that you wanted to get on that side of town. And if you write
any of his writing, it's all very respectfully yours. It's all very Victorian, but it's all very, very polite. So next. So what he did is he came to town and he decided he was able to open up his first factory. It says here, he came to the country, shortly established a small factory for manufacture of hair and bristles in Colston's Hill, near Hookstown Road. And we had only known about the Wilkens plant. So when Jerome showed this to me, I was like, what? We have to find this.
I just found our second quiz question.
What
is Hookstown Road? Does anybody know what it is?
There you go. No.
Dean, you know everything.
Don't
get horsehair.
Don't tell me that, because I have something else that told me it was Pennsylvania Avenue. And so anyway, if it's on Ross Avenue and above Hoffman, then this is where it would be, which is the McCullough Homes. But the streets have different names, and sometimes they go by different names, different places. But I think this is it, just because 3 of the streets align with that. The other thing about this so where we are, just to get a sense of the city, is here in this development. And you can see how some of the blocks are filled in and some still haven't, but they're all framed by roads, which was going to be a problem for his business. And so he realized he needed to go further afield than this. This is a map that would have been back, so it has these little buildings, would have been his little buildings, but it's still too contained. And so this is a poem that was read when they opened up the new factory, and it's all very festive. But the part I'll read is looking around here at the buildings and the splendor of the factory stands with the joy pervades. The hall is beautifully decorated, the ladies are assembled to dance upon the music, the first roll. Anyway, it's all very sing-songy. Back then, they were just happy about a hair curled factory, you know, like, but it's all that industry. I mean, there was a lot of optimism.
And then there were other things nearby. You know, you had there was a stockyard down
No,
there.
we're not there yet. Next.
Well, okay. Well, there's also
We have to get there.
there's iron forges and stuff like that.
So he found this little slot of land. So here's Frederick Turnpike, it was at that time. It's outside the city. It had Gwen's Run kind of, you know, rolling through it. And so it was only 15 acres. And, well, actually, it started out, he just leased this one at first. Then he leased this one. The Carroll family, who had a lot of land over here, were just as happy to get rid of some of it. But he ended up just keep buying the land from them. So here is that little leased property in green. Then the factory land ended up being what's in red, and all the stuff run in the blue is what he eventually bought up and either leased out to people or, you know, so he had a whole wicked business going beyond the factory, so that when his estate, and we were lucky to have this because Martinet keeps all the records of all the states they were ever, they're the oldest civil.
They should be a history evening next year. I don't know if you've heard of Martinet. It's one of the oldest businesses in the city, and they're still going. And
In the country. So they have incredible records that go back 1700. So anyway, they have this in their files, and the thing that was kind of crazy is his estate, when he died, was like 21.3 million. And he had 6 heirs, one as young as a baby, and he divided evenly among all 6, which comes into play later. But anyway, so I just wanted to show you that. And the other thing I wanted to show you is, so that's where his first factory was. This is where his next factory was. This is where he eventually was able to have an estate because he had enough money to be away from this factory because it smelled to high heaven. And this is where the warehouse was, down on Pratt. And eventually that's where he's buried. So he was a West Side boy. Everything's on the west side. So the factory starts out, and so this is from 1853. And the other thing, he's so proud of what he's done, that he is constantly commissioning these artists to do a record of what the buildings are. So what you'll see here is, this was his house, and it says, proudly a sign on it says, Wilkens Hair Factory on it, and you can see it back then it was all horses, and they're drying the horse hair, and they used also pig and cattle, and then this is the bales they had, and then this image looks like they even dry that hair on top of the roof. So it's very interesting, but this area was called Snake Hollow because it was like the Gwen's Run, which is a tributary of Gwen's Falls, kind of just carved its way through this zone. And what he was able to do is take and tap that stream and channel it, which gave him all this land to build the factory on. So next. So now that's 83. So 3 years later, he's got more, it's bustling, he's got a little turret, you know, like, and this house now has a garden. Now he's growing his garden, he's got it, you know, hemmed in, he's starting to build walls up between it and the factory. And it doesn't keep out the stink, but it's very beautiful nonetheless. And so he's still got horses coming down the turnpike. And then there's a picture of Wilkens, and it's probably, I don't know if his brother or who knows his
We never
business
found
partner.
out, yeah.
We haven't gotten that far yet. But next.
We have to keep the context. It smelled really bad. I mean, really bad. There's op-eds from back then saying that it smells like a pig pen. We would be better off with a pig pen, in fact. This hair is terrible. It's everywhere. It's awful, awful, awful.
But he could always find workers.
And he found them in droves. It turns out that there was a huge crush of immigrants from Germany and Austria. Early on, most of them were from the western part. They could get to the water quicker that way. And what they used to do is sail into Fells Point for the most part. But then later on, B&O Railroad made an agreement with the Bremen line, which is a shipping line that came through. Now, the bad thing about this is that Jillian can point at it on the top there. They came into Locust Point, and like it is today, it's not the best place to hang out.
So Locust Point's right now.
Yeah, that's Locust Point. That's what that's from the Saatchi map as well, the 1869 Saatchi map. And it shows the context of what they were coming into, which is just a bunch of...
These are boat riggings, and I don't know why, this is one we need to replace out quickly. We discovered that these old photographs, especially if they have a lot of single lines in them, the raster don't work so well in PowerPoint, we have to keep using them in, but anyway.
But what's really great about it is they established this line, and folks came through there, but they didn't stay. Only about 25% of them stayed. But we had numbers, upwards of 60,000 people, arriving here annually.
We were an immigrant town.
It was insane. It's a very German city. It really surprised me. The more that we dug into this thing, we realized that there's a huge percentage. I think 30% is what we found.
One of mine when he came over to New York, and I'm sure he worked it out, but
Yeah.
he got that pier and he got it working, because he just was so industrious.
It's crazy.
He said, "Oh, I need a train. I'll get a train. We need the immigrants." I mean, he literally just saved everything and then threw it back into the business, and that's why he prospered.
Yeah. I mean, over the course of that business, you had over a business's life. You had over 1 million people come into the city from that line. It's just an amazing immigration story. The picture at the very bottom that you see there, that's not from his time, that's from 1914, but it is at that location, and it shows what folks would have seen when they first came in. It's a pretty incredible journey that they were all making, and then they just found themselves to the west side. There of course, there are other German areas, Bay Street on the northeast side, on the east side near where we've got Highlandtown now, but they made their way to Wilkens, and 700 strong eventually made their way over there.
And I wanted to find the quote. I came across it, and I wish I had kept it, but it was almost like it was a rites of passage to work at his factory. You get your legs going, you get your start, and you'd be there for like 3 years, and then it was like, off you go. But they managed to stay that long. But so he always had lots of people to work in the factory. And so it kept booming. So here we are, 1882, and now what you're seeing, he's got a whole alley coming in. This is still a house with a garden around it. Now we have a whole little village setting. That was actually a warehouse, but these different things did different things. So now we've got Bristle. We've got Bristle Works. So what they used the hair for back then, really in demand, was upholstery. So like all your Victorian, like little sofas and things like that. So because it had a good resiliency, and so it kept its oomph. And so they would use it in that, but then they also used it for bristle brushes. So he would expand his business. They started using it for wigs. I mean, they used it in a lot of different ways, and each of these buildings started to have that specialty in it. And so he was very industrious. He used every little thing in
Everything, yeah.
He heard a story where after the Civil War, he claimed all the horse hairs and things.
We've never confirmed it. We think it was somebody telling a joke from a newspaper a long time ago, but apparently he sent folks down to Civil War battlefields to collect horse hair. It can't be true, but I hope it's true.
You get a sense of this image back here, so you get a sense of the stink, because he thought this was field work.
Yeah,
this is laying the hair out and drying it.
I figured they were working in the field. It's like, no, that's all the hair.
And so here's the whole factory setting. Now this little house right here, which is that one, we're going to see later, it still exists.
Oh, cool.
And so these are just some images of the house. This is a carriage ride. You come to that alley. He had 3 wives in the end. His first wife, he had 3, yes, sequentially. The first one died, I believe. The second one, I've not found out why. Maybe she just couldn't take the smell anymore. I don't know. So he had a brood, I think, 7 kids in the end, or 9?
9 kids, right?
With the 3 women, and so here you have a little garden gazebo. He went to do his business out back. So these are all from the Wilkens estate. Oh, and one thing I wanted to point out. So everything framed in orange was done by Chase and Bachrach Studios. So you can see here, this is Residence of William Wilkens. And then this is actually a stereo view, and it has another one image, and it says the name of the company. I'm just showing you the one side, so it doesn't take all the room. But literally, they were done so that the image was slightly shifted, so you could put them in this, stereo viewer, and you would see things 3D. So it was a precursor to film, because you get that sense. So he was so proud of the work he did. He had all these images. So go next, and so this gives you a little sense. This is the back garden. There was a building here that's labeled office in the plan view. So I don't know whether he came out and did some of his office work out there, but you can see the garden, and you can see clearly the factory over the high wall, and this is looking over the porch on the back side of their house. So he kept a good watch over the factory. And here's some interior views. This is him. We believe that this may be in their depot that was downtown on Pratt Street, where they sold the materials. This is their bale of hair. You can see how they're getting the hair in bundles ready to sell. These are women who are working on, I believe, wigs, because you can see these brushes that they bring and comb them through. Next. More views, how they would have to hang the material and keep it dried out. I mean, there was a whole process. I tried to read up on it, but it's not like you can come across how to do that today. So I had to look at some older stuff, but it's still fascinating to me that this was a whole elaborate business, And then, of course, we got synthetics and we didn't need to do all this, but at the time, he had really perfected the art. And he would put his money into getting the best equipment. So what was ending up happening is he could produce it cheaper than any other place in that area of the US, and so he couldn't keep up with the orders. He was just like churning out the stuff constantly. And so you can see it did fulfill his dream of what he wanted. And then he got a lot of other people to work. He had his son-in-law, he had another man that he worked with, and so he began to be freed up to travel. So he oversaw, but I just wanted to take a look at this setting outside of the factory now. So you're on Frederick Road, looking southeast, and you can see there's not a lot out there yet. I mean, you have this factory that's planted, creating a whole village in a way. Next. But what begins to happen is they start to lay out the roads and things come forward. Now this is an image that's in that factory lithograph that I showed earlier, but this is the B&O railroad coming through. And it was really important that they found ways to bridge over this culvert. They're so proud of his culvert that he even had a photo of that. So, I mean, he was just very industrious. And we don't know where some of these images are, but we're thinking this is Wilkens because it's so broad. So when they laid that road out, and we're thinking that's the kink in Frederick, and that this is his garden, and that's his house.
You're looking east.
Yeah, looking east. And then I'm going to just show two more slides in there, and then give it over to Jerome to sort of talk about the surrounding community that's there. But I wanted to show you these because when I got this, there were some images that were more evocative than others, and this was one of them. And we're looking over these back ramshackle yards, and it's like, where is this place? And what is that thing? Is it a monastery? And what's that over there? And so we scratched our head. We thought maybe it was over by Lafayette Square. We didn't know where this was. But then is when he started looking into the breweries, and I looked at the Sachet map that has all these wonderful industries that are all along the side border, and then I saw that, which was shown up in there, and I'm like, this is looking from his balcony over to that side of the city.
No, we puzzled over that photograph more than anything else that we've done in this presentation.
But we didn't think it was ramshackled. Jim, you have to understand, this was not the city. This was the Outback.
And it was built very quickly, so it's a little
Yeah.
bit chock-a-block, and it's massive. What's the acreage? 18, 20 acres, I
Oh,
think?
yeah, so he ended up with, so he started out with, what did I say? It was,
Well, just for the site alone. Well, you can get an idea of it if you go out there today, the West Side Shopping Plaza. You're gonna be really surprised when you drive into the lot, because it's just massive. They can easily fit a second set of shopping, a second shopping center in that space.
yeah, so it went from
I think
15
it's-
acres to 234.
Oh, goodness gracious.
I mean, like.
That's
he
everything.
just- Yeah, he just-
Yeah, it's a whole shebang.
anyway,
I mean, the main
next.
building was 400 feet long, for instance.
Yeah, and so we had this image. This was the other one that we puzzled over. So I'm going to ask you all, what is it?
Quiz number 2.
I know someone's going to get it. Come on, you're a nerd group, you'll know.
You're looking north.
Well, you may not know where it is, but you should know what that thing is. Okay,
Is it a brickyard?
yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Wait, was that Dean again?
Yeah, ding, 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 ding.
Get out.
So we weren't sure what this thing is, but it was in that other image, right? But this is the thing that caught me, is all the row houses were perpendicular to the road, which was not how everything was being done. And then there's some kind of hill back here with a lot of greenery and some tall thing there, and I was like, where is this? So once we realized that this thing could be that thing that we had looked at Sachet's map on, you can turn it to there.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go, there.
Okay.
So there's the brickyard, and it even says, what's it?
Pitcher and Wilson, I think is who it is.
Wilson? Yeah.
Pitcher and Wilson. We found out that it just kept growing so quickly that there were all these other concerns. It turns out there were brickyards all over the place. They needed everything to support this fast pace that they were keeping when they were building, so.
And you can see how you're looking and you're seeing those perpendicular row houses, and then you're seeing the trees up there on the hill, so it's going up. So we're pretty sure that's what the image is of. And he had these all in his collection, so he was darn proud of this place too. I think he leased out to the brickyard, but the brickyard is sitting right where Wilkens kind of slams into
It's Monroe.
Monroe, and so it doesn't exist anymore. But I just wanted to show you, they laid out the bricks, they sun them, they dried them, they stacked them, and then here they are piled under to get fired. And then these we have not been able to locate. So, Dean.
We
I mean, that's a pretty darn cool image. We can't tell if they built the townhouse all at once or if that's the factory, and we can't tell if that sort of is like gable. I don't know, and there's huge lumber, so we're thinking it's got to be the factory. They don't build row houses. They always build them too thin, the wood.
We drove around trying to find 3-story buildings. It turns out there's not a lot of 3-story buildings
In that
in there, so
area.
you figure that could help you narrow it down. So there's a few, but it didn't look like a
he
candidate.
had several. This is a compilation of 2 photographs. This was an important building to him, and I think that was across the street. So so they had a depot downtown, but it was supposed to be 5 stories, so it's not this. So we have had a dickens of a time trying to figure out where this is of, and if it exists at all, because anything that's 3-story in our area, in the Wilkens, that whole side of town, tends to be the things that falls apart, because I think they get chopped up and leased out to lots of people, and then they just aren't taken care of as well.
Yeah. There's some anecdotal evidence that says that it's probably at Wilkens and Monroe. He had built 17 homes in one commercial storefront on a corner at that location. If you start counting houses on Google Maps, it's a few too many, but you're like, it could be there, but we don't know. We got a lot of things like that we need you guys to hunt down. We were like, we should put it in, it should be all, thought through, forget it. People will tell us what it is.
All right, next. So here we're in the factory setting, and we're looking out, and so these are some markers that you can still see today. So we have a church here, we have a large building there, and if you go to the next, there's only one last thing I wanted to say, and then I'm going to hand it over to Jerome. So all I wanted to share, so Kate read the church, and he'll tell you about that, is the family had taken great pains to find this. They came to Baltimore one time, and they were very proud that. So these are homes that Wilkens leased out, and so it's sort of like an early development. They were They were actually a little nicer than some of the others, but these are them today. So they still exist. And you can see how the topography was a lot to work with. They're propping up, this is a side prop to the street. So, you know, there's a lot of topography change in here because of how Gwen's runs had sort of eroded.
A little bit in green, you can see, it's really faint, but you can see that church right there, that photo from 1870.
And that was called, which one, this was called?
That's St. John German Evangelical Church.
But it was known as,
It was the Butcher Church.
It was the Butcher
Butcher's Church or the Rooster Church.
so they had a lot of butchers in that zone.
It's still there today, minus the steeple, like everything in West Baltimore, it seems. Struck by lightning, probably. Yeah, the church is hilarious because it was very much a butcher's church. One of the main, one of the big parishioners is a guy named Lydecker, and you'll see some stuff later on about Lydecker. He was a butcher in town, but he wasn't just any butcher, not to put down anybody here who might be a butcher. He had a stall. He started out pretty modest. He comes over like all the rest of these guys do. And then he gets a stall at Lexington Market. Then he gets one at Richmond Market. He gets one at Holland's Market. And then suddenly he's got meatpacking businesses all over town. And he becomes a sort of pillar of the community on the west side. And he starts building a lot of really cool stuff. And we'll look at the Lydecker house later on.
Okay.
So this is, if you go back for a second here. One of the things in the background there in purple, you see this tall sort of flat building, and then that's the church we were just talking about, St. John's. That tall thing there, we puzzled over it and we thought, what could this be? And then it became clear to us pretty immediately that it's one of the breweries that are there. On the north side of Frederick, the land that he had started to get filled in, probably around the 1860s, 1870s.
We're at 86.
1860s, 1870s, things started to pop up. And of course, there were breweries. Now, it was a surprise to me to find in 2020 that there were so many brewers that were stacked in this area. And how many brewers do we have total over here, Jillian?
9.
9.
They were having a good time before the prohibition came
That's on
along.
me. But so there's this big collection of brewers. The first ones were popped up around the 1850s. And then in 1862, a company called Olden Wall and Joe. You've probably heard the name Joe. You've seen the name Joe before, J-O-H. There's a Joe Avenue that's down on the southwest side. If you shop at Aldi like me, you see it all the time. And that's Ferdinand Joe. That family started out making really small batches of beer. It's funny to say small batch because it sounds so contemporary. But they didn't make as many barrels as the big breweries that were on the east side and the northeast side, you know, the folks who were up Gay Street or on Brewers Hill. So they sort of petered out very quickly. And what happened is they ended up getting bought by another company, and then Joe's daughter, whose name was Eigenbrot.
Oh, yeah.
Joe's daughter.
Right there.
It's right there.
I don't think that's his daughter.
No, I don't think so either. I never found the color version of that, too. It's a shame.
Yeah.
Joe's daughter was Eigenbrot, and she ended up marrying the proprietor that was nearby, who ended up being a factory worker at the brewery as well. His name was James Eigenbrot. And they built this, and this actually became a little bit more successful. No one over here did the volume of the other folks in town, but they did enough to keep people in the immediate area stocked and sort of well boozed up. Those two buildings that you see on your screen there on the right-hand side, they're still there. This is not an old photograph. If you go there, it is in really, really tough shape. And it's one of the reasons why we got together to look at this is I had gone over, done some sketches, wrote a history of it. And then just by happenstance, we were looking at the same types of things.
I think I was doing an online search and then I came up with your site. And I was like, hey.
I keep getting sidetracked on my
Yeah.
Instagram because there's histories there, now there's histories here, and now they're all.
What is that building down there? Because that showed up on the slide and I never knew the history.
That is Helen Eigenbrot's house.
Oh, where is it located?
It's on Maiden Choice Lane, just above Wilkens. And it's the home of a landscaping company. It's a business. But it's gone through a lot of different iterations. At one point in the 50s and 60s, it was a school. It was used for a bunch of other things. There's evidence that it's actually something that was built on the site of Carol's first home. and he, not his first, his second home. They actually built Montclair. They stayed there while they were building Montclair. But they've since built on top of it. So adjacent to that, to the breweries that are up there was also a soap making factory. At first we thought nothing of this, and then we discovered that there were 2 buildings that still exist.
Yeah,
These guys
so
down here.
These were the factory. There was no map that shows them. Kind of cool is apparently he created the patent on the soap bar.
Yeah, it's the Chris Lips factory. Made all these soaps. We couldn't figure out what type of soaps there were initially. It turns out they were pretty, bottom of the line stuff, but yeah, he may have gotten the patent on the bar. Eventually, he turns it over to his sons, and his sons in the 20th century, they ended up making chocolate, which is really odd because there's a confusion amongst the two. But if you go out there today, and you should, after you've gotten a look at this, and you should go out and explore. It's really pretty incredible to see that these things are still there. The factory, the main part of the factory itself, is now a residence that was built sometime in the 2000s. So it's taken up on the north side. But Lips Lane is still there, and these 2 shops are still there. There's a couple
Yeah,
of
a lot of the names of the roads around there are from the businesses that existed.
So we were saying earlier, there's still a lot of stuff. It was really surprising to us what we ended up finding. Just in the immediate area that circles the site
recognize
itself.
that? That's that tall vertical house that was in that image with the horsehair being dried, but that's the other side of it,
Yeah.
catching the west light.
What's really great is that they ended up having this community form with just about every thing that you would need, every type of service that you would need to create this little village that they worked in. Churches started to pop up. Holy Cross is on the upper left, still
This
there.
is from the Wilkens collection, and that's it today. It got formstoned, but otherwise, it got a new steeple, but
What's really great is that image that you were just pointing to on the bottom. Jillian finds that image of the stereoscope things, and then to the left of it, there's actually a house that peeks out. It's right there, right there. We didn't know what it was, didn't really care what it was, and then suddenly we go out there, take a look around and say, wait a minute, this thing is right behind Holy Cross. It's that building. So for weeks we were thinking, well, it's so prominent. It's very nicely proportioned, really well
I thought it
designed
was the
house.
foreman's house or something.
We thought it had to be somebody at the factory. The foremans were beloved. All of the people who worked in these factories, it seemed to be a lot of love for everybody who was in the management position. It's really odd. But that house is there. We were hoping that it was one of the managers. It's not, but it is somebody who rented from Wilkens. He rented a couple of plots of land to the south, one that was on Wilkens and Millington, and his name was Niche, Charles Niche. I always want to say Nietzsche, but he's Charles Niche. And Niche and Spedding had a plant that they operated just down the way. They were very good friends. He was renting from him, and he actually had a portrait made of Wilkens and put it into his house. When you go out there, you'll notice that it's in really tough shape. But you'll get a feel of how nice it was at one time.
And that's across from the factory, that's a film church.
Yeah.
It still exists.
I really want you to take this one because you're so fascinated with it.
Oh, yeah, this was one I said, I need to know what this one is.
I tried to get this one out at one point, and you said, no, absolutely keep it. Even kept my car in there.
Yeah. It's all box.
So this
this is a current photo. This was one taken a year ago or 2 years ago when I first started to put together information on so some of this is a little more dilapidated. I don't think this part exists anymore.
It's in the 2600 block of Frederick, so it's just immediately east of where the site
So
used to
he
be.
found an advertisement, so we're thinking it's one of the same. They called it the Stagecoach Station, built in the 1700s. So the front part might have been the 1700s, and then they added on over time. Because it looks like it had, like an inn, it looks like it took people.
So we're still digging. If you find some information about this, let us know.
Well, we do know that the woman who lived here was a widow, and her husband was the butcher in the area.
And before the butcher, there was actually a drugstore that they owned in Irvington that they were known for years. For 55 years they had been there. They stayed in that house into the 20th century.
Good investment, Rob.
Good investment. Actually, let's go quicker through these because we want to get to questions. Nearby on the east side of the site, there was a small patch of land that was sort of bounded by Wilkens and Furrow, and I think Monroe on that side. It was called Little Jerusalem. I had no idea that there were synagogues there. I expected to find maybe one in the vicinity. There's two there, and there were others that we just sort of left them out. But we don't know what they did in the area. We don't know if they worked in the plants. We don't know if they worked,
We do know
stockyards.
Wilkens
We
was
don't know.
Lutheran,
Yeah,
that much we know.
this is new. This is Mill Hill deck of cards. For some reason I missed this. You probably are familiar with the deck of cards. It's,
The Wilkens Avenue, so Wilkens gave to the city 34 acres, or 33, in 1876, so that he could get this whole side of town developed by having a major thoroughfare come through. And
it's
the 2-block area ended up making one huge row. How many are in that row, Dean? We're wanting to know. We couldn't find it in the chat material.
Could you count from 0 to whatever the 100 block is? Like 52?
you keep losing your place is the problem.
That's a deck of cards, it's supposed to be 52. Let's call it that.
Call it. Anyway, so,
But it's allegedly the longest one in the
so
city.
Italianate, you
Or
know,
Elvis Row for years.
yeah.
I think I found a longer one. I'm not kidding. I think I found a longer one that's on the northeast side.
Right.
I'll dig it. Look,
Keep going.
let's see.
And we want to throw this in, even though this is on the other side of the tracks. So Carroll Park right here, if you go down Monroe, they create a bridge to go over to a whole, can you say it?
Schleitzen.
Yeah,
Schleitzen
19
Park, shooting range, beer hall, these different activities that they had. You
Dramatic.
you find it here also, but you also find it in other parts of town. Along North Avenue at Gay Street, there was a similar type of thing. There were singing clubs and things like that these Sherman communities had. A couple of years ago, riding up Washington, and I hear all this noise. It's like oompa music. They still have a German festival there. At least they did as recently as 2020. So it was a shock. I couldn't figure out why it was there in the first place.
So Wilkens apparently,
It's
though, was
there.
pretty, he made this happen. That's what we understand. So he was thinking out for his whole community about where people go to recreate.
There was no place to sort of break out, and this was it. There was actually, at the end of Wilkens, there was actually another park that was there, but they've chopped it up, and now it's just a triangle with a statue on it. But what do we got next?
Yeah, we're into what is no more.
Yeah, it's a shame that this is no more. The fun thing about this, though, is listening to Jillian on the phone as we both drive around the neighborhood and her screaming, "I can't find it. Where's the damn house?" It's like it's
I didn't say that. I knew that it existed, but we were looking for what's there now. That's what's there now.
It's the Shipley Lydecker house. Some of you might be familiar with it. It was to the west, the north and west side of the plant.
And you just go up that street.
If you look at the picture below it, you can point to that. That's what it looks like today. It's a little housing group that they built in the 1980s. They tore this house down in 1967. It had been there forever, and it had multiple owners. It was actually built by a Carroll. And then
For
it
his
changed-
daughter.
Yeah, for his daughter. And they did a little switcheroo where they kept the name Carroll, although it should not have been a Carroll, just to be able to claim the inheritance. But they ended up building the house, and then they sold it to this guy named Shipley, who,
Yeah.
where is he?
1851.
1851. And he was quite a character, apparently. We were looking on the,
So this is called Shipley Hill, right, on the side? So, because he owned
all of it.
so Martinet, again, great. They had his whole estate on here, and so he owned the top half. Wilkens owned the bottom half.
You were on the Martinet last night. We were on the phone together, on Zoom together, and she's clicking through, and it's just a field of blue for Wilkens, and then it's another color that's a field of pink, and it's all Shipley. Those two just owned that whole area. Shipley was known to be a bastard. He was not a nice guy. He was a shrewd guy. He sued everybody he could find. And it seems to only be appropriate that he's claimed the name of this mansion. Lydecker.
But you might know.
He's the same guy.
if
Lydecker's
you-
the same guy.
If you go to a certain place, you'll see this. It still exists. Do you know what this is? This is your next
I've
trick
got to
question.
cover up.
You have any idea what that is?
Come on, Dean, you can do it.
The Haunted House.
And
Disney. 1957, they made it the Haunted House, and which park?
Disneyland.
Disneyland.
And it was,
That's their drawing of it.
that's a sketch by a guy named Ken Anderson, who's sort of the chief Imagineer at Disney at that time.
And you took it out, but there was a photo, and it looks just like the other one.
Identical. He's just flipping through a book that has a bunch of houses that are from a certain period. And he thought, oh, this looks haunted. And he ended up putting that up. It's still there, apparently. I thought they had closed the ride. Apparently, they've renovated it, and folks really love it. These Disney folks really, really love it.
So what happened to our great factory? So here's the,
This is the spinning newspaper that you see in the movies as they try to tell the story as things wrap up. You know, by 1917, things had started to collapse. Well, we should get to the Wilkens actually dies in 1876.
no,
And then-
70,
I'm 79, 1879.
Yeah.
And then it's taken over by his descendant, William, and then Gustav Schlenz, who is his son-in-law. took
well,
over the
they
business as well.
divided, so we had 6 kids, and they divided it evenly, and so some got some parcels, some got others. One was as young as 1 year old, so it kind of, got to be a little infighting for the older ones trying to say, that person does have any right over this stuff.
And there were Chicago people too.
Yeah, so Wilkens had a daughter, and then he had a son, but his son married but never had kids. And then his next son moved to Chicago and started the business there, the hair factory business there. They had, what I didn't show you is all those wonderful lithographs. If you look, every time you see another year, they've added new places, New York, Boston, like this thing just kept growing. But here it's doing the opposite. It's catching fire. The hair is on fire here.
catches
Eventually.
Multiple times it catches fire.
Yeah.
Sadly, a good
And
deal
then,
of
it was in receivership in the 1920s.
In the 1920s, in the early 20s, it was in receivership. Gustav Schlenz dies, and it gets taken over. They had another spot of trouble when World War I happened. The property was actually claimed through the alien property. Somebody else can
Yeah, they
help
didn't
me out
want,
here.
they didn't want Germans owning whole swaths of Baltimore.
Anyone who is from Germany at that time, who was from Germany at that time, owned property, they claimed it. And then they actually gave it back to them later on in the 20s, but they claimed it. And a lot of the litigation carried on into the 50s regarding it, so go figure. Anyway, so it started to spin out. It went into receivership. They were factory. It was an interesting tidbit. If you go over there right now, this is a black neighborhood now. And we kept searching and searching and searching to see if there was any presence of black folks over in that side of town. And it's just nothing. I'm like, what the heck is going on? And finally in 1923, there's a strike that happens at the factory. And it's a bunch of white guys walk out because they had to work with colored women that were hired. And then there's some soft peddling that's saying, it'll be okay, the factory's fine, we'll still be producing hair, so on and so forth. But that shows up, and then a series of advertisements in 1925 start to show up, hiring colored women. Not men, just colored women. So it was a really awkward turn there that we didn't expect to see. We just weren't there. This is really odd. But the building catches fire yet again, goes in receivership, and eventually in 1929.
Industrial Park.
Yeah, they start to, 25, they sell it off to a
Isn't
company
that the
that's
next
called
slide?
R.J. Nyberg, and it becomes an industrial park.
Oh,
The initial
yeah.
promise was that it was going to be a bunch of brick buildings that were going to be rented out. That didn't happen. Then they said there was going to be some houses that were going to be built there. That did happen on Benton Street, but not in the entire site. And it limps along for years. The site still has some of the old buildings. There's Acme company that's there that makes auto parts. There's an auto storage place there. My favorite is there's an asphalt casket company that was located there for years and years and years. And it stayed that way until 1955. That's when they started selling off the remainder of the properties. They had sold chunks here and there. Finally, it goes away in 55, and then it goes silent until 1962.
1962, grand opening, West Side Shopping Center.
West Side
And you
Shopping
know,
Center.
at first, I just thought, oh, it's a dog of a center. It is the life of the community. So this site has still remained the life of the community. I mean, there's not a vacant store, they're all bustling.
You know, if you go there, if you get to that side of town, West Side, there's only a couple of places. There's these islands that you can get goods and services. West Side Shopping Center is one. Edmondson Village had been for a while, but in between, and it's coming back, by the way, it's a good story if you've read it recently. But there was nothing between MLK and Catonsville that you could go to and just buy fresh produce. So that is keeping it down, that's holding it down. And it's still mostly occupied. The orange spots that you see on there, those are the vacancies that are for rent. You get in touch with the folks who own it now, who rent out these spaces. They're pretty funny. They're like, well, we don't know what you're talking about. It's like, okay, you'll find out. We'll send you the stuff eventually. But it's a vibrant, active shopping center that plays a really important part of what's going on in that part of town. There's very little information about it, though. Are we close?
Yeah. Yep, sorry.
Wait.
We're almost, we only have 2 slides left.
Wait, one of the great things about it is when they first built it, they had all these activities advertised, so they'd have the city park concert band would go from here to other plazas around town. And if you like R&B as much as I do, the guy who wrote Young, Gifted, and Black and produced Nights Over Egypt by the Jonas Girls, he played in that band and directed the orchestra. So,
We did want to show you the downtown, which the downtown that Wilkens owns. It's called the Wilkens Building. It still exists. Here it is in all splendor, but here it is during this time. It actually is only 4 stories here, but they put a 4th floor on because this is one of the few cast iron buildings. And he was all about creating manufactured stuff, including manufacturing the building. So that's in its worst period when it was a dog, what's this, 81?
yeah, if Fred Chokin is listening, if he's out there, your name is in that article.
There you go.
So that's a great thing. You were on chapter
But here it is. You can see the bales of hair and the big shop windows, and sort of a lot of activity out here with the horses and such like that. So,
But it dovetailed perfectly with who he was. This is a very, it's like a tinker toy when you put these cast iron buildings together. And it's funny, there's only a couple left. Baltimore Street, there's one. Utah Street, there's one. There's a Fava Fruit building that became the City Life Museum that's over on President Street, which has an amazing story in and of itself. But yeah, but also, one of my dearest friends, Fred Heiser, designed the addition onto that thing, and it's a beautiful addition, and he was gracious enough to provide us with a ton of information
so
about
we
it.
like the fact that Wilkens still has a piece right downtown, This was a find, so there's only just it's 1 or 2 slides. We had this image from the family, and we're like, oh, well, maybe that was their residence, the country residence, and we were like, but Jerome found it, it exists.
Somewhere around 2 o'clock in the morning, you got an email.
Yeah,
So it's right there.
So it exists on Frederick Road, right here, and Shins, so his daughter, that was her husband.
It's on the campus of St. Joe's.
Right, so here it is on the campus, and it exists today in all its finery. Next.
It's a Varian Brothers consulate.
And then this is his country estate, and I stumbled across this by looking at a map, and I suddenly went, William Wilkens, oh, wait a minute. And so this is at Old Frederick Road. So here's the factory, so you're going up here. And so that, right, if you transpose that today, that's on Old, National Park and Cook's Lane.
They chop off Frederick.
So they sold off the estate, but there was an article that Jerome found, and this is a photo in it of his house back then. And I just wanted to read what it said. So off to one side of the house, enclosed by a box hedge, was a flower garden of about a ½ acre. In it were flower beds of many shapes, hearts and diamonds, circles, and still more. And I have never seen anything like the beautiful white birch arbor in front of the house. It was round, and the limbs went far out, close to the ground. From inside, you could not see the sky. This arbor was on the farm when we bought the place, which was previously owned by William Wilkens, and must have taken years to grow. So he loved his garden near to the factory, and he created it out in his estate, his country estate.
I ended up superimposing that estate over the current map, and we nailed exactly where the location was. There might be something there where the Samuel Reddy School is. There's a couple of outbuildings that are still there, but we haven't got a chance to go out and visit it and confirm it, but we'd love to see it.
One slide left.
There we
And
go.
so
Oh, there we go.
this is where we end. So like I said, Wilkens died in 1879. Luckily, he had, I think his brother died several years earlier, and he knew to get his will together because his brother hadn't. So it was interesting because when we went to Loudon Park, which had, I guess, was founded in 1853, so around all that time, we thought this was his place. But it turns out that's his son's. That his son's wife, who never had children, did for her husband, and every year she would put wreaths, and they have bills stacked like this big.
Receipts as recent
I
as
think they wanted us to
1993.
take them.
Yeah.
They're like, do you want this for your research? That's okay, we'll leave it there.
We were terrible. We just bothered these poor people at Loudon Park.
But anyway, so that's where the newer part of the park is. That's where he's buried, right at the top of the hill. And in here, it's him, and I think they had a daughter that died early, and there's a different plaques that they have. But this is a park that was really a park. I mean, people would go visit it, and it had this. It was the place on that side of the town to go.
There were tens of them buried there. I think you found.
Oh yeah, 44. There's 44 Wilkens that are buried there. We didn't know that.
But not his horse. His horse was not buried there. He's buried somewhere else with this beautiful monument, but we don't know where it is.
He was his hair.
Yeah, right. No, we don't know that.
He loved his horse.
And I think the last slide is just our contact information. So if there's other stuff that you have or whatever. Did we get it under 9? Okay, 8:30. Look at that.
So
We did okay.
we have time for some questions, but because of the Zoom, I'm gonna, anybody who has a question, I'm gonna repeat the question so that it gets in the record. Would anybody like to open it up for questions? Yes?
Why is it called the Curled Hair Factory?
Why was it called the Curled Hair Factory?
So that was part of the process to get that buoyancy for the upholstery. So there was some stuff that they did straightening things out, like for wigs, but there's other stuff they were trying to create, like your mattress springs. And apparently it all has to do with how you dry it and everything, that you can get it to curl.
The actual name is
And-
steam curled hair. Is what they
Yeah, so they steam it too.
Before or after?
So it was called-
After.
So,
Although the pit bristles and beaver tail, that stuff was
being
also.
curled.
So the first time this was invented was like 1823 in New Jersey. And so it became a popular thing to have, is these curled hair factories, until synthetics took over. It was the way you got your bounce to your upholstery. But it also, they did it for wig. He also, had the business kept ballooning and, you got wigs and this and
There
that.
were other places along the perimeter, like north of the site that we found, like where the Ingenbrot Brewery is, that became Englander Furniture after a while, and it became sort of a moving company. So they had furniture too, stuff that they had manufactured, probably used the same product for.
Right, and because his earlier work doing salesman, I mean, he just had connections all over. So they shipped the stuff all over. And, it put Baltimore on the map. People traveled to just work there and get their footing in the States. So I think it's fascinating. None of us know, a lot of us don't know that it even existed. Some do. But. And part of it is also because Wilkens, that family that had 6 kids after the son, moved to Chicago. And so the son that stayed never had children. So we don't have the connections to Wilkens. There may be, but we don't have the direct connection like I have for the Chicago family.
There's a whole
And
side
Australia.
story. There's a whole side story about them returning from Germany to try to claim the monies in the 1950s.
Oh, so his third wife had 2 kids, and she went back to Germany when they were just babies. They tried later to claim their inheritance, but.
Oh, nice.
Nice.
Dean, did you have?
How big was the workforce over the years?
How big was the workforce? Is the
Between
question.
700 and 800 people.
At peak, or you have a sense of its growth?
Not sure if that's peak, but that's the boat that.
Some of the earlier things I had was 300, I went to 400, so I think in its heyday, it was up to 800.
Yes.
Just like today with immigration scares, could you comment a little more detail on the anti-German sentiment in World War I fuel, I guess?
So the question is, just like today with the immigrant scares, can they comment on the anti-German sentiment that happened around World War I?
Well, part of the reason why we have all the records of his stuff is because they had litigated this several times, yeah, even at a federal level, to prevent the German side of the family from having any ownership of it. So, yeah, I mean, when I think after World War II, you especially were like, nah, no more, forget it, you know, you've lost your chances. So, but it is fascinating to me that we have such a dramatic town. And, you know, I don't know how all that resolved itself in this city. So I don't know that. We were nerding out as architects over the buildings. We don't know the culture that lasted after that.
Unfortunately, Nick and Brigida Fessenden, they weren't able to make it tonight. They could fill in the gaps.
Yeah, the Immigration
That's a
Museum,
shame.
they were giving us a bunch of stuff.
Well, I mean, during the First World War, German Street was renamed Redmond.
Yes.
Ah,
No,
that's
German
right.
Street was renamed Redmond Street.
I just showed you the anti-German
Redmond Street.
inspection, and that was nationwide.
Right.
Baltimore had a huge German population.
Yeah, there's multiple newspapers, singing clubs all over town. There's, haunted houses.
That's a-
Yeah, School 68 that's over here comes up a lot in the papers, and that was a half English, half German language school, which is pretty interesting today if they try to pull that off, sort of half Spanish, half English school. But yeah, they were here, and then the wars just sort of knocked them out of the box.
Yes, you have.
So can you mention a little bit more about the smell?
The question is, can we talk a little bit more about the smell?
I can imagine why, but do you know exactly why it was so
And why was
bad?
it smelling so bad?
And then whether there was some like construction or environment or any sort of like human making that could make it less?
Well, I mean, this is livestock, so, I mean, there's excrement that you have to get off all that, and so that goes somewhere, and you've got this nice Glens Falls run. I mean, they didn't have plumbing out there, so, I mean, part of it is just getting rid of all that stuff. But then, if they actually have to do any kind of steaming or burning, anything that's body parts doesn't smell good when it's burnt. And so I don't know how much was you saw that big billowing factory top. I don't know how much was the process that created the stink, or just having this all laying out in the fields all around create a certain stink, and then having an open sewer pit running through the whole area. So I think there are different ways that all could go south, because, one of the big things that happened in the city was sanitation and creating putting that all in pipes and getting it away. But until then, it was just out there for everybody to smell.
Yes.
With brickyards and the hair factory and the soap factory.
And the breweries.
Pretty terrible place.
Communism.
The breweries with its perfume.
I think we have time for a couple of questions. Way in the back there, somebody?
Yeah, can you say something about who the customers for the factory were and how they developed over time?
So the question is, who were the customers for the factory, and how did that develop over time?
So they did, so they produced a lot of stuff, but they hauled it downtown. So they first had, horse and that, you'll see all those lithographs. But then they ended up they had a rail line that went along, like, they had horse-drawn things on rails. And then he also founded the B&O Railroad, so he wanted to get things out further. So, and they had their depot right downtown by the shipping area. So part of it is just, it was a wholesale business. It was
So who was
sending
he
it
selling
out.
it to?
Wholesalers.
What kind of wholesalers?
People making furniture.
People make
making
furniture.
brushes, People.
Who make, who sell wigs, that would be an interesting study to do, is just to look to see if there is enough information in, I don't know if the family still has it, but what were their sales records?
Just about any synthetic product that you can imagine today that is trying to substitute a natural product that you use for stuffing things or insulating walls or putting plaster up.
Make bags, they would make use the hair out and make bags, because I read a little thing about how they were having to use the warp and everything, so, to create that weave. I mean, we're just so used to everything being made, processed, but they didn't have that way to do that back then. So, yeah.
One more question? Somebody else have, way in the back there, did you have a question?
I was just wondering, you say they made hair for stuffing, but also for wigs. Were they just like exporting hair for other people to make wigs, or were there people making wigs in the factory?
So the question is, were they exporting hair for other people to make wigs, or processing it so that other people could manufacture, or were they manufacturing the final product themselves?
Yeah, I did find stuff saying that they made, it's sort of like they were getting it prepped for, to make the wigs. I don't think they
So
were
they were
making
selling to
all
wig
the.
manufacturers.
Right, like, they were selling to furniture manufacturers, they were selling to wig manufacturers, they're selling, you know, so I don't know that they made the whole product there, like the bristles, they made the bristles, but they may not make the whole brush. The thing is, I don't have that whole history, but from what the images that were shown and such, it didn't look like there were whole products being created as much as bundling up this stuff and selling it. I was reading somewhere that if they had everything in lengths that all were, like, the more regular they made it, the higher price you could get. So partly is
More processed?
in
the
some
more
ways it's
expensive it
more,
would be,
yeah, when you say process, but you saw all that equipment that they had where they're making things bundle, so I don't have the whole history of how they made things, but I didn't see anything that indicated they made a final product.
Yeah, just about every ad that we've come across, dozens more, it's just for the curled hair product.
It's a lot for that, but they also did bristles. But I guess what I'm trying to say is it was a lot done wholesale.
Okay, we can maybe one more question then.
Thank you. One question, one quick comment. You mentioned Samuel Worthy School. There's also on Evanston Avenue. Are they connected in any way, you know? And my comment is that during World War II, the lead up to it, Baltimore had a very active pro-Nazi contingent. And there was a place called the Deutsches House that burned down quite some time ago. On the second floor, I had the opportunity to see it in the middle 70s. There's a room 3 times the size of that alcove. And all the walls were huge portraits of the Nazi leaders. The display cases all over the bottom, with medals and swords and all kinds of weaponry, and plaques, statements, most in German, some in English. But that was the headquarters of this region's pro-Nazi movement. But that, when Gandhi was, all this stuff was still there in the 1970s, probably until it burned down.
In the we didn't come across anything like that, but I know that in the 1930s, late 30s, that there was a German battleship that was parked right next to the Broadway Pier.
Yeah.
All the Nazi flags and swastikas in full regalia, and then they all marched over to the mayor's office where they were feted.
Yeah,
It was a normal thing.
German population at that time.
Yeah.
In relationship to the rest of the ethnic groups in the city.
Oh.
The Germans were one of the larger ones.
There was, during World War I, there was a similar type of thing where there was Hansa House still there downtown. There was plots that were hatched to sabotage dynamite. There's munitions that were both. The Black Tom explosion, one of the largest explosions ever in New Jersey, that was plotted here in Baltimore, Maryland, at Hansa House by a bunch of German dudes. You can be proud. Yeah.
Okay, well, I think that's about all we have time for, so everybody, thank you for coming. Try to be out by 9 for the VLP, so there's still some snacks in the back if you want to grab something. Thank you very much.
At least stop raining.